Uh, Welcome to World Building and Accessibility. Um, I would uh, love it if my kind and generous panelists would be so good as to introduce themselves. And when I say my panelists, I gotta cop to it here. I am the least important part of all of this. Jennifer is the one who was kind enough to help me set this up and bring in people that she knew that were good on this subject. Jennifer, could you start by talking a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Kretchmer. My pronouns are she, they. I have red hair. I'm wearing some gold flower earrings. I am sitting in front of kind of a magical looking forest background and wearing a dark purple sweater. I am a writer, producer, actor. I do a lot in the tabletop space, but also in television. And I do a bunch of work in advocacy. And disability rights work. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which affects my connective tissue, and I am an ambulatory wheelchair user. So that means that I call myself the riddle of the Sphinx. I either am on 2 legs, 3 legs, or on wheels, depending on the day. So I am so excited to be having this conversation with everyone here. I think everyone here is so extraordinary, and I'm so thrilled and honored to be able to chat with all of you about this.
Yeah, I think I will be best. Maybe actually, I know I won't even be best at moderating this, but since I fall into the moderator role naturally after all the cons, I might do a little bit. Temple, would you be willing to introduce yourself next?
Sure. I'm Blind Temple at Blind Temple on Twitter. I do blind accessibility stuff for gaming and just blind accessibility stuff in general. I have one eye and one that kind of works, but not really well. And and my second disability is I have end-stage kidney disease, and I'm looking for a transplant. If you have one laying around, go check out my pinned tweet. I help blind people, especially, find D&D because it's a game that the sighted and the blind can play together on even terms. It just requires imagination. It doesn't require a whole lot of anything. You can figure it out, and there's plenty of aids and stuff that helps you do it. I'm not sure which shirt I'm wearing. And I'm an
It's
old
a
guy.
dark blue shirt with some sort of yellow or gold logo on one side. Oh, it says I aim to misbehave. It's an I aim to misbehave. It's a Firefly
Oh,
shirt.
cool. Yeah, that's a good choice. Obviously, my fashion skills aren't that great. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much. Is it Elsa?
Oh, Elsa, you're muted.
Yes, that's me. Hi, my name is Elsa Sjunneson. My pronouns are she, her. I am a self-proclaimed deafblind hurricane in a vintage dress. Today, my dress has a montage of bats flying around with some heather and ivy, which is one of my favorite dresses. I'm known in the gaming and accessibility world for the Nebula-nominated Fate Accessibility Toolkit, which I wrote and developed for Evil Hat. I also was the co-editor-in-chief of Disabled People Destroy Science Fiction, and I've been nominated for and won multiple awards in the science fiction and fantasy writing world. My work has appeared at Fireside, on CNN Opinion, at Uncanny Magazine, and I have a book coming out next year from Simon & Schuster on the topic of disability and specifically blindness and deafness representation in popular culture. So hopefully people will look out for that. You can find me at Snarkbat on Twitter.
And Imani, could you go next?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Imani Barbarin. My pronouns are she, her. Oftentimes root for a disabled person as well, but that's usually mixed into an argument, but that's neither here nor there. I have a denim shirt on. I have blue hair to match my denim shirt. I am a Black woman, and I'm mostly a writer, blogger, social media whirlwind, if I could take somebody's word. And I usually talk about disability in media and disability representations. I'm a fairly novice gamer. My very first game was some Mary Kate and Ashley Mall game on Game Boy Color, and I've since graduated to Animal Crossing, New Horizons. I love swimming, so I'm so glad that the game allows me to do that during quarantine.
And Mackenzie?
Yep, that's me. Hi, I'm Mackenzie De Armas, Mackenzie Lane DA on Twitter. My pronouns are she, her. I am a Filipino woman with a messy, dark pixie cut, black square glasses, and a red flannel. My background is a tessellation of various rainbow squares, and I am a tabletop game designer, writer, and content creator. I have won an Emmy Award for my supplement, Canarles Candy Compendium, which is available on the DMs Guild and features 50 magical candies. I'm also the lead writer for the Islands of Sina Una, which is a campaign setting based entirely around pre-colonial Filipino mythology, which you can find over on thedeckofmany.com. I'm also one of the core designers and current writers for Kingdoms and Warfare, which is a production by the wonderful people over by Matt Koval and the wonderful people over at MCDM Productions, and I am autistic.
I am already becoming better educated. The way that you've all introduced yourselves reveals to me that I have made a lot of assumptions about who watches me on Twitch. So I'm going to try to introduce myself in a slightly more informed way. My name's Pat Rothfuss. I am a white, I want to say middle-aged, but I feel like I'm lying there. I'm older than middle-aged, beardy man. I am slightly balding, and I am hiding messy curly hair with a pair of headphones because I haven't cut it since COVID started. Murder hobo is how I identify, usually visually, and it is mostly not a joke. That's kind of my aesthetic. I am in front of a series of bookcases that are full of various geeky things, most of which are prizes for the Worldbuilders fundraiser, things we are giving away. Is there anything else that it would be good for me to do there?
Pronouns are usually helpful.
Yes, I am he, him. That's something that I've started doing more in Zoom. Unfortunately, every time I restart Zoom, it keeps my name and loses my pronouns for some reason, which sucks. So I always have to
Remind me, I
can
can tell you how to fix that.
Oh, great. Honestly, I'm realizing I could try to moderate. We could take questions from chat. I would, and I don't want to spring this on you, Jennifer, but I worry that if I try to mod this, I have modded panels where I've not been qualified to mod before, so I can fake it. But I would love to start this in a better way. How do you think the best? Where do you think the best place to start would be?
I think just having a conversation ends up usually netting quite a bit of points of discussion and sharing experiences and just discussing things that people may not have been aware of previously. So I think that sort of is where we go. But I think one thing we can just start with is, let's talk about inclusive world building and accessible world building, and where are things falling? I mean, where are things falling flat is a whole mess of a conversation. But it kind of, where are places that we can begin change in thinking about world building, whether it's for fiction, whether it's for tabletop, whether it's for video games. In gaming, what are some things that people can start to think about? Yeah, Elsa's got.
This unmute button is really challenging. So basically, the way that I like to start is so often when I'm talking to fellow writers about their high fantasy or fantasy settings, high fantasy, low fantasy, secondary world fantasy, fantasy in general, is the assumption is that because you're basing it on, say, a historical setting, there are no disabled people there. And what I would like to point out to literally everyone is that actually there were more disabled people in historical time periods. The reason why you're not thinking of them as disabled, though, is because our current modern construction of disability comes from the Industrial Revolution and the idea that a body must be able to function within capitalistic norms in order to be considered able-bodied. What that means is there's probably characters in Pride and Prejudice who are disabled. You're just not reading them that way. There are characters in plenty of other fantasy settings that are disabled, but you're not thinking of them that way. My favorite thing to tell people is that yes, every single character in your D&D party has PTSD, which is a form of disability.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I think pushing people to really look at that context and shift their window of perception of disability as something that is in modern construction into this is how bodies work really changes the way we write fiction. It changes the way that we write our games, and that's really important.
This is Imani speaking, and I think it's very hard to kind of break that mold too, of telling people that there are real historic people that we refer to every single day that had disabilities, that because they were alive before the Industrial Revolution and this mindset that disability existed, that they are still a part of our histories. And when we talk about fantasy and world building and adventure is inherently dangerous, and therefore it is also disabling. And so there's characters you might write at the beginning who may not turn out completely able-bodied by the end of the story. And people don't really think about that. They think that the hero is always supposed to be this emblematic character of what ability is supposed to be, because it is through ability that you conquer, not through disability. So I always try to tell people, like, there's a whole diversity within the spectrum of human life that people aren't really representing either.
I think something else that's really important in this too is the discussion of how we've framed disability as binary in society, that people think it's an on-off switch, that if you are blind, you have no vision, when that for the vast majority of blind people, that's not the case. Many to most wheelchair users are ambulatory in some way. Many deaf people have some hearing, and it's just, we have these ideas that we've distilled down in society into these misconceptions that these things are binary, and so that shifts the ideas of what people are able to do or not do, which then limits the possibility of what people actually are permitted to do, what's permissible. Anything else is seen as transgressive, or it gets the faking label. And I think when you're talking about fantasy, there's no room for nuance at all, often, and I think that's a huge loss in storytelling potential.
And as the person who is probably the least far along in this conversation, this is interesting. I get to be the emblematic able-bodied white guy, where I'm like, oh wait, I get to ask some of the dumb questions. I'm going to be the everyman here, which is a role that I continuously try to leave behind, and continuously realize that there are still more conversations for me to have. But what you're like, I'm realizing now, like Grandpa George, like, is it fairly common that if you know somebody, you don't think of them as having a disability, or I don't know disabled people, but really you do? It's just that's just your personal experience. Is this something that, because I'm like, oh, Grandpa George was blind. I taught him how to program a computer when he was blind. And Grandpa George traded the stock market. He was Mensa level genius. He learned how to program on a Coco computer, and like wrote a stock market analysis program in BASIC that he troubleshot. It was like he printed it out and would read it with huge magnifying glasses to make his program work. Grandpa was legally blind and had neuropathy, and he took care of my grandma. Grandma Nor had MS and was bedridden for her whole life. But that was just Grandma and Grandpa. I went up the hill to visit them. And I don't think of myself as disabled, even though I don't have good sensation in this hand. I hurt it real bad 20 years ago. I was telling my boys, like, well, I can't play that game. That requires two hands on a console, and I suck at that. But I will admit, I would never refer to myself as having a disability in the same way that is that wrong? Am I holding the conversation back in the same way that I never used to think of myself as being able to have trauma because I've never been to war?
It depends on your world.
Yeah.
Like, it depends on your relationship to your world and your ability to interact with it. So a lot of people don't often identify as disabled because they can still work. Like, that's the number one thing I hear from people is like, I still work, I don't have the disability. And I'm like, okay. And it really has to do with like what you're trying to do in that moment. There is no list of disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's designed in that way so that people can come into an identity or come into services and allow these understandings of diagnoses and disability to expand and contrast based on somebody's interaction with their world. So it all depends on what your definition of inability to do something is.
I think I'll also say sort of your question about viewing your grandparents kind of depends on, there's this social structure where I think people want to see their family members as the most capable. And so in order to do that, I think people who read disability as a bad word will sort of push that away because they want to keep thinking of that person as, well, healthy and doing well for themselves. And so you get a lot of pushback from family, especially when you start identifying as disabled. I have friends and family who have been like, but you're not disabled, you're Elsa. And I'm like, yes, but I'm deafblind, and that's definitely a disability for me. And I don't think of disability as being bad. I just think of it as a part of who I am. So
that's the big one. That's the big difference, I think, in how the disabled community approaches disability versus how people who don't really think about disability beyond very almost a sketch of disability caricatures and is that we for me, being disabled is no different than someone saying I'm tall or short or have red hair, or it's part of who I am. It's part of my identity, and I have no problem with it. It's being disabled isn't a bad thing.
As someone who came into identifying as disabled this year, who actually started becoming comfortable with identifying as disabled and accepting that part of me as part of my identity, because I got my autism diagnosis end of last year, beginning of this year, and for a while I was just like, I'll put it underneath no one needs to see that part. It's fine. I'm Mackenzie. I mean, I might be autistic, but like, it's fine. We don't need to talk about it. And then I realized I can't put that away from me. That affects me every day. It affects me when I'm on stream. It affects me in my work. I realized I would have like, not meltdowns, but like I'd have minor breakdowns on stream and I'd start noticing them. And I'm like, this is something that is affecting me. I can't run from it, but it's not bad. And slowly coming into terms with accepting that and realizing my own internalized ableism against that and learning to accept that part of me, it's interesting. You have to make that choice to be like, no, I accept this part of me. I am disabled and this is who I am, and I'm not going to keep pretending like it's a bad thing, because if I pretend like it's a bad thing, it's not, and it's perpetuating a falsehood that disability is inherently bad. There isn't anything wrong with being disabled.
Yeah. Most of the pushback I get on my disability is that I'm cheating. I'm not actually as blind as I make people think. Because I have glasses, which blind people are only supposed to have dark glasses. And I have people that say, well, you can see this, but I can see things that are high contrast a little bit further away than regular stuff. So if it's white on a black background or a dark background, I can see it a little bit further away. But most things I can see with the glasses about 3 feet away. Without the glasses, it's about 5 or 6 inches. And you're constantly confronting that with people thinking that you're faking to get some kind of attention or sympathy out of people, and that you're not really disabled, you're just doing this for whatever reason. And it gets really tiring after a while to have to explain how bad my vision really is.
I have to say that's my experience as well as a deafblind person. Deafblindness, there is only one person people think of when they hear the word deafblind, and that is Helen Keller.
Yeah.
And I'm super tired of being compared to Helen Keller, as you might imagine. But deafblindness is across a spectrum, much like every other disability is. We're talking about ambulatory wheelchair users. It's not you sit in your wheelchair all day long. You can sometimes stand up and do things. But with deafblindness, I think part of the challenge is that we really do have that one sort of larger than life monolithic image, and that gets reinforced through the media that we watch. Like, all the blindness that you ever see on TV is blind people who flail at walls and can't see the damn thing. All the deaf people you see are signers who don't have the ability to hear anything. So it's those kind of reinforcements, I think, don't help.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about media in general, whether it's video games, TV, or film, is that we don't often have a hand in creating these representations or these stereotypes, but we're also forced to live by them on a daily basis. That's why nuance is so important in the characters that are created, no matter what the genre or medium. So it's very frustrating to kind of always watch things and people show disability in a very binary way, and then us have to go out into the world and be forced to kind of be people's teachers in a way, just by existing and being asked to explain our disabilities, like to random strangers because they watched a show once that said that disability only is supposed to look like A, B, or C.
Honestly, I had it happen to me literally today. I was standing on the street waiting to pick up my lunch because there's a nice taco truck on the corner that's doing nice COVID safe precautions. So I was getting a burrito and I'm waiting for my burrito, and I check my phone because I got a text message, and a man from out of nowhere zoomed over and started interrogating me about whether or not I was really blind. But no, you aren't really blind. You just have the stick for fun. I'm like, go away.
What the shit? I am Jesus. I am so angry. I literally had no idea.
Welcome to the struggle, my friend.
What is it? Speaking of disability rep, just in media, having to explain I'm autistic is such a struggle because every single autistic character in media is cis white guy most of the time. And I'm just like, no one thinks I match that. I'm like, they either say I can't be autistic because, like, yeah, you don't look autistic. You're not in a science. You're not doing math for a living. I'm a game designer, but whatever. They'll be like, oh, you're just Asian. That's why you're good at math. That's the other one that I've got a lot when I was in high school. Before I knew my diagnosis, they were just like, oh, you're just a really good Asian. That's why you're so good at math and science. And that's why I didn't get a diagnosis for so long. And just, I've gotten people tell me, like, you can't play Dungeons and Dragons. You're autistic. You can't do social situations. You can't role play. You're autistic. Autistic people can't do social situations. What are you doing?
I mean, it's the list of excuses people have why you're not disabled is so long all the time. Yeah. And then when you say you are, they try and fight you on it.
Like you can't
you're
be
too
disabled.
young, you're too pretty.
I know you.
But it's actively dangerous if you're not white. Like any of those situations Mackenzie was just in can really easily escalate into a physical confrontation because she is a woman of color talking about a disability. Like the same goes for Black women. It's a mess.
Especially in nerd spaces, being a young woman of color in general in a nerd space is really dangerous. Adding being a young disabled woman of color in nerd spaces, being someone who's doing it as a career too. Guys, my existence is stressful.
I will say, as a deaf and blind woman in convention spaces, especially, it has made me very vulnerable, and I have experienced violence as a response to me saying, yes, I'm actually disabled. I do think that people of color have it way worse. Like, there is no question about that. Black and people of color, disabled people are experiencing that violence and that threat at a much higher rate. But I have also, and it's scary.
That's why intersectionality is super important. And that's why intersectionality in representation is important. Because like I can just speak from my personal experience, having to contest with the stereotypes of Asians along with the stereotypes of being autistic prevented me from actually getting any therapy or any help learning about my disability and figuring out how to accommodate my own brain for 21 years of my life. And that we need to be better about making representation and making it intersectional and encompassing those identities and showing off the different facets of disability and race and gender and all of that, because it helps everyone. Even those who may not identify as that character, they can see there are other ways to be this identity here. It's not a monolith. And that in turn perpetuates throughout the society and how people in real life view real people. And it's super important to do that.
Yeah, and I think we can draw a direct line from that. I mean, we're going to go dark for a second and talk about the stuff that's happening with hospitals and things. But there's a direct line between those ideas of disability and then specifically when you add in multiply marginalized people and access to ventilators, access to fair care. There's this idea that disabled lives are not lives worth living. And there was a Black man who died because of this. He was quadriplegic. He had a wife. He had 5 kids. And there was a recording of his doctors talking to his wife saying, well, he has no quality of life, so we're not going to give him a ventilator. I know at the beginning. Oh, I'm sorry, Imani, go ahead.
I was saying it's even actually worse than that. They starved him and wouldn't give him water for 5 days. So they didn't want to, quote unquote, waste any resources. His name was Michael Hickson. He was in Texas, and they killed him. And when we talk about this, like, the intersection of race and disability with this virus is deadly. That's why when we saw the anti-masker and these protests, it happened literally less than a week after the data of who was affected racially came out. So it's very unnerving to see that and to see people just go willy-nilly about their day like nothing is happening, while the disability community is like holding on to this roller coaster we did not sign up to be on, wondering when we're going to be next.
Well, I'm a 6'2" white guy, and I don't face any of that because of that. I'll be standing next to a friend of mine who's also disabled and a person of color, and they'll get all kinds of crap. And controlling my language, the person that is verbally assaulting them will assume that I'm on their side. And that is, they find out really quick I'm not. and it's sad how people see this image of everybody and put them into these little slots. You're this, you're this, you're this. You're not a real individual person because you have a disability or because you're a person of color. You're something that I can simplify and make it so that it works for me and doesn't make me think too hard.
And that's an interesting angle that I was just in my head is one of, I have in my head, I've always dreamed of like, could I bring to the geek community a set of like 10 geek commandments that if we all, like a shorthand for us that would help people remember important things. Like, and one of the very good ones is Will Wheaton's "Don't be a dick." It's easy to remember. It is a good rule of thumb. If you follow it, you will not stray far from good behavior. Another one I'm very fond of is Hank Green's "Imagine Me Complexly," which I circle back to endlessly these days, because as you guys are talking about this, I'm thinking, I occasionally mention like my dyslexia, and I am not hugely dyslexic, but I was trained to tutor people and to recognize dyslexia. And when that happened, I'm like, oh, so this is why I can't cope with new names at all. This is why I read real good, actually, because I recognize words as discrete entities, not a series of letters. And so, but like on Twitch, I'm trying to read somebody's username and I'm like, nope. Nope. That is a collection of letters I have not categorized. And people are like, oh, you're not dyslexic, which what I've always taken to mean from them is like, well, no, you do words good. And I'm like, cool. And I've never felt the need to push back against that because that's never been a core part of my identity. But also I realize now I've been missing an opportunity to say, actually, it's a spectrum. You can have shades of everything. It's like I can type pretty good with this hand, actually, for which I'm very grateful and fortunate. But that doesn't mean that, I am strictly able-bodied. Ooh, but I feel such a poser as soon as I say that. Like I'm claiming something that I don't have a right to. But I know that's probably bad because that's the same thing that probably kept me from getting therapy for years, even though I recommended to all of my friends and family that they get therapy. And as slowed me down in terms of acknowledging trauma and stuff, because, I know people with real trauma. Mine isn't real trauma. So yeah, gosh, I just got to say, everybody, this is really great for me. I know this isn't for me, but this is so helpful. And I see people in my chat that are like, what? So, I mean, I'm glad that I'm kind of glad that I'm not the absolute last one to get clued into some of this stuff. And also thank you guys again you got to do this all the time. I know what it's like to be forced into the role of somebody who has to explain it again. It's like, okay, no, I'm sorry, book 3 isn't out yet. And that's like a position of extreme privilege I'm coming from. But, it does, it having to do the same thing again and again, it wears a body down. And also, as a big beardy murder hobo looking son of a bitch, nobody's gonna start anything with me. So I don't deal with any, not a slim sliver of what I would be dealing with if I were not a white guy.
So I want to throw something out there to you, Pat, because I know you're talking about a lot of people having the what we've never heard of some of this stuff before reaction. And ableism is really toxic. Ableism is a really toxic concept and force in the world. But the thing is, ableism isn't just hurting disabled people. It's actually also hurting non-disabled people who are out there. And here's why. One, you could become disabled at any point in your lifetime. This is not you don't just get to keep your able body, but also because we aren't accepting disability as a spectrum, because we are sort of saying, well, you have to be one thing in order to be disabled. What happens is that people who need help, like what you're talking about, don't get it because they're not willing to identify within that toxic structure. So think about it this way, glasses, these are an adaptive device. If you can't see without them, you are using an adaptive device to help you see in the world. If you use a cane because you have a bum ankle, that's an adaptive device. People who get older, you're not just aging, you're not just seniors, you have a disability if you're wearing hearing aids. We only say that it's deafness when it's somebody who's younger. When people wear hearing aids when they're in their 70s, we just say, oh, grandpa needs hearing aids, he just got old.
Wow.
So how that's just something I want specifically non-disabled people to chew on, is that ableism is hurting them too.
And ableism hurts people, like you said, I always tell people ableism hurts you whether you have a disability or not. And like one of the things that I find very, very interesting is that this entire year has been determined by disability stereotypes, quite literally. Like one of the stereotypes that we often talk about is what's called the super crip, or the disabled person that kind of overcomes their disability.
Ooh, I have so much to say about that, but I will.
I want to hear about this. I want to hear about this.
So, like, the super crip is like this disabled person that is like a hero and overcomes their disability, and that is the exact storyline that a certain president used to valorize his supporters. You're not just like ableist stereotypes don't affect just disabled people. It has been forming your entire reality. Like we have literally been watching it unfold, and people are like, "Nah, that's just a you thing. Don't get upset about these representations that are coming out in the media about you. Don't be upset. Don't be bitter. Don't be angry." But I'm like, this is what? Are we living in the same world? Like this is the entire thing that you could. This is in the entire world we've been living in.
Well, as soon as people started getting sick, one of the first things I started just blasting constantly was like, we have to stop equating illness with morality. We have to stop equating illness with morality. They are not the same thing, because when people we don't like get sick, people are going to start getting really excited about it. And then what does that say about the people who we love who get sick?
All right.
Yep.
You cannot equate those things. And that's, again, rooted in ableism. It's this idea that disability, that chronic illness, these things come to you because of something good or bad you did. It's all, again, like watching my language here, but
and also
it's
like
crap.
I mean,
overcoming
I will just
disability.
say personally, feel free to cuss to your heart's
Okay,
content.
it's bullshit. It's just total bullshit.
There because I didn't before, and I would have if it were a Twitter thread. Fuck ableism, it's killing it.
God.
Yeah, and Pat, also on what you were saying about the getting so tired of saying the same things over and over, that's literally why I created the accessibility tool, the accessibility guide, which is it's my pinned tweet on Twitter if people are looking for it. But it's like, I think it's around 100 resources. Toward gaming, but also publishing and streaming, because I got so tired of sending out the same handful of resources over and over and over and over to people, when it's the same stuff we're saying over and over. It's 101 constantly.
Yeah.
So
I also want to throw out there that when people started really celebrating like people who got sick who they didn't like, that actually did collateral damage to other communities.
Oh yeah.
I'm the daughter of an AIDS victim. My father died in 1993 from AIDS. I grew up during the AIDS crisis, and watching people gleefully celebrate somebody having a deadly illness basically triggered my trauma from my childhood. So when you do that, especially because it's been a lot of my liberal progressive peers celebrating certain communities, I'm like, hey guys, you're actually hurting me right now. Can we not?
Well, one of the things too, I think on ableism is that it's not all intentional meant to hurt us. It's, in most cases, I really feel that it's ignorance. They don't know anybody that's disabled that they recognize as disabled. They don't bother to learn about what disability is. And I know I get angry and I can't try and educate everybody all the time, but I try to as much as I can to tell people, know that what you just said is inappropriate. And like on the 18th of every month, I do Ask a Blind Guy thing on Twitter, where you can ask me any question you want and I'll answer it for you, to tell you, explain to them what's going on. Because if you don't ever educate them and you just get mad at them, they're just going to keep doing it. And you got to try and help the situation and not just get angry.
And it's interesting to me because the way, I mean, in some ways, I'm the best person to talk about, for certain communities, I'm the best person to talk about patriarchy, because people will listen to me who will not listen to other people with a lot more experience suffering from the patriarchy. I mean, I am the poster child of the patriarchy. I am one monocle and a top hat away from being the platonic form of the patriarchy. And we talk all the time, and I've heard it said all the time. It's like the patriarchy hurts everybody, you know, and I mean, me least, you know, but it still means that, like, when I'm at a playground with my kids, I feel like a huge creeper. And I share that experience and I talk about that. But like this, seeing this, like ableism hurts everybody, is so much more. I think it's so much bigger now, certainly than I realized. But in the context you guys are presenting it, what this means is like, hey, nobody is going to slowly over the course of their life become more and more a beardy dude. But over the course of your life, I mean, just statistics say something's going to get you a little bit and you will become less able. And so if ableism hurts everybody, it literally will be you. You probably should lay some groundwork right now. You know, I've always had great eyes and now I'm having to learn glasses. And I thought that I was sensitive to that before, and super I was not. Like I've always said, hey, I want to make sure that we always have a good print copy of my books in a big size, because like I'll read a paperback, but now I can't. Like, you know, and you know, but wow. Okay, I'm talking more than I ought. We started a little bit late. If people have a hard out, I will happily cap this at 8. If people are willing to stick around a little bit late, and please hear me when I say, if you got somewhere to be, you got a busy life, please, like take care of that. Don't feel obliged to stay. But the chat is crowing here. I just want to read quickly somebody here saying, as a disabled scholar of intersectional human rights and identity, professional educator and advocate, thank you all for this amazingness. Just tuning in now while I work, and I stopped because you've brought me to tears, because there's almost no discussion of ableism, toxicity, accessibility, and more in critically informed human rights-oriented fashions. Thank you all. I am heartened and feel less alone in doing this work. I 100% that from me. But yeah, if people are willing to stick around a little longer, there's a couple there's a couple of questions that have come in. Could we do a couple questions? So here is, these are from Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much. How can we help normalize the idea, and this is pulled from my chat, how can we help normalize the idea that it is not the disabled person who is the problem, but the failure of society to accommodate disability? This is a great question.
Well, I can give you one as a low vision person. If you own a business or if you run a restaurant or anything like that, you can start to have large print menus and not get super huffy when someone asks for them. I know that seems like such a banal, practical thing to say, but honestly, I know Temple and I both can't read a menu that's far away. Like, I can barely read most menus unless they're pressed up to my nose, which I really don't want to do during COVID. Which is why I love that apparently restaurants now are like doing a thing where you can scan a code on your phone and then it's on your phone. And I'm like, can we keep that? So changes like that will actually make disabled people have the experience of having accessibility without having to ask for it. And that's a huge deal. Not having to ask for permission to exist in public is really important.
I'll also say, speaking as someone who works in fantasy and does a lot of like writing and game design, something that we as creators can do is representation, putting more characters into the things we make. Something that it's really common for people to have disabled villains, people who are villains because they're disabled, and that perpetuates this false equality between disability and illness with moral failing, and that is problematic and perpetuates a lot of stereotypes. So we should, if we like create fantasy environments, and I've talked about this before, how the fiction we create perpetuates into the real world. If we can start perpetuating these accessibility aids in fantasy that aren't stigmatized. I know, like, for example, in the Eberron campaign setting released by Wizards of the Coast, they have prosthetics. However, they take up an attunement slot, which means it takes up a resource for adventurers to use. And in a game mechanic system, means that it costs them something. It means they aren't able to attune to as many magic items because they have to do this. It penalizes them for their disability. And so we need to work actively to correct those mechanics, provide new mechanics that create accessibility aids that don't penalize disabled characters, and make sure disabled characters and disabled NPCs in games or disabled characters in fiction that we write, they aren't disabled. I mean, they are disabled. They aren't villains of the story. Or, you know, having more than just one token disabled character to be like, yeah, we got a disabled person. There they are. Woo. And then like having more aspects of it. If there isn't a lot, like one person can't uproot the entire system of ableism. Not one person can do that. But if all of us work together to sort of do our part and in our own capacity, provide that representation, communicate, patent your, like you were saying, people will listen to you. Using your platform to elevate disabled voices. That's another really good way to help start correcting that assumption that disabled people aren't the problem. It's society being unable to accommodate or refusing point blank to accommodate disability.
Another tiny action item on that note for my fellow science fiction, fantasy, and horror writers, please stop using cataracts as a sign for evil. It's really not fun to have small children look at my right eye and then scream and run away. So if we could just depict them as pretty and not scary, that would be super cool.
Yeah.
Imani, you were gonna say, oh, sorry. I saw Imani was gonna say something and I was like, wait.
I was just gonna say, evaluate your own internalized ableism, because you're projecting a lot of crap onto disabled people. Disability and ability is a spectrum, and so you're probably on it regardless. But don't, put these ideas out into the world because you are embodying this hatred for yourself that you want other people to feel as well because they're disabled. I do not hate myself for my disability, and this idea that any sort of character that you write has to hate themselves because of their disability and that's their storyline, that's bullshit. I want heroes that are disabled. I want conmen. I just want a whole host of nuanced portrayals of disability that have nothing to do with me being angry about my disability. I want to use my disability as a tool, things like that. Let's stop pretending like it makes me inherently angry to be disabled. I'm not.
That is so good. That is amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. The end. That's amazing. At Temple.
Yeah, I'm just tired of disabled people either being the victim or the bad guy. It's like the only time that we can be competent at something is when we're evil. And how does this guy take over the world? But you can't have one hero that can stop him.
I was thinking of one of the best worst examples of this is in Shyamalan's Unbreakable, but also
there's so much ableism in that so many levels.
Yeah, on so many levels. It's like it's such a compelling. It's honestly, I think that was probably his most narratively compelling story, and he himself is pointing out this convention in comics, which is you always know who the bad person is because they're ugly or because they're hurt in some way, and then of course
it's that moral equating of disability with
which I want to trace that all the way back. Like somebody has to have done a bunch of that goes all the way. That goes back thousands of years. I can think of the historical antecedents.
Really covered this in my book. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also too, it also plays a role in race science, because race science is essentially trying to diagnose otherness.
Yeah.
Using the medical profession. It's basically trying to diagnose, blackness, otherness as a disability. Yeah. It's ingrained in our society.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I think one other thing.
How many times do you see Asians as the bad guy in whatever movie it is? Everything from
curse me in my inexplicable kung fu.
Yeah. It's it's ridiculous.
Now, is something really good came up in the chat here. Somebody asked a question, and Jen, you came in to help with an answer. But I think it's so good to like share it here because not everybody reads chat. Also, I'm realizing not everyone can read chat now. And but it was somebody came in and said, and some people are not good at scrolling chat, like me.
Is it the question about the term?
Yes. Could we do that?
Yeah, someone came in and asked about the term differently abled and if that was an acceptable term. And my answer is very, very emphatically, absolutely not. No. It's a euphemistic phrase. Any sort of euphemism for what disability is playing into those ideas of othering, of making it dangerous, of something you don't want to talk about. Use the word disabled. It's not a bad word. It's a descriptor. It's an identity. Period. End of story.
We all had a visceral reaction to that word.
Yep. We all were like, no.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as bad as diffability, but it's up there.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. I hate it.
Oh yeah, that one's ugh.
No.
There were a number of different language guides about ableist language as well that are worth looking at, and also starting to examine your own just day-to-day language, which is so deeply rooted in ableism.
English language is basically laden with ableist stereotypes and terms. The one that I've been working on people with here has been that so many people are really excited about using the phrase blind to something or possibly deaf to something. And it's always as a sense of, well, they're ignorant. Look, just because I'm blind doesn't make me ignorant. It means I can't see for shit. However, I do actually pay attention to an enormous amount of information, both inside of my environment and also just in general. I'm not uneducated. It's not any kind of comment about my ability to think through things. It is literally, I'm not ignoring something intentionally. I am just blind. So if you are trying to say that somebody is being willfully ignorant, please say that instead.
And also too, like even the phrase, like when you get angry about somebody who's just like bothering you, go, what's wrong with you? You're asking them if they have some sort of disability that explains their behavior in that moment.
I goofed this one. What I will say is, hey, everybody who's unfortunately like me and behind on this conversation. If somebody says to you, ooh, what you just said, and fortunately I am blessed by having friends that are smarter than me, or people in the chat who are willing to call me on stuff. I remember once I said, I took a picture of something my boys did, and I said, here's my children. One of them is obviously a good, right-thinking child who I love, and the other one is adopted, because one of them had made like a peanut butter sandwich with regular peanut butter and the other one used crunchy, and I was just bullshitting around like you do on social media, and then somebody came in and said, hey, joking about somebody being adopted being not as good is shitty. And I'm like, oh my God, it is shitty. That's so shitty. And so like, everybody, don't double down when somebody says, hey, maybe not that. Listen to what they mean. And I did the same one literally on stream, I think yesterday, where I said, hey, you know that the world's a mess. You know, unless you're deaf and blind, sorry, I'm so sorry. But, and somebody goes, hey, that's really ableist. And I'm like, oh shit, you're right. That's just a phrase.
I am in fact quite aware that 2020 has been an utter shit show.
Right. So like,
it's made me a better writer to eradicate ableist vocabulary.
So cliche. It's cliche
you have
shit.
to
Get
sit
it out
and
of your
think
writing.
about what you're saying in a way that using terms that are crap means you don't have to evaluate what you're actually trying to say.
But like the thing that's really important to know is that like it's really deeply ingrained, and so when you mess up, that's okay, as long as you acknowledge, apologize, and try to do better. You are going to mess up. We live in a very ableist society. Ableism is super ingrained in the English language, in our fiction, and because of that, it's ingrained in our mindset. It is a long process trying to unlearn that. even people who are disabled. I'm still trying to unlearn ableism. I still have a long way to go. It's okay to mess up as long as you're actively trying to be better about it.
I'm the worst blind person in the world for for doing stuff to help blind people. I forget alt text constantly, and then have to go back. I'll see a tweet I did like a week before and go back in and put, retweet it so that I can get it right. It's not something that just able people do. It's just a constant struggle. Everybody has to work at it.
Yeah, and I think there's also something called conflicting accessibilities, where like for somebody like Temple or Elsa, like so putting in alt text and like those minute buttons is not always accessible to them.
Yeah.
So it's accessible to somebody else, but it's not accessible for them to do. So there's like this also like this very weird dynamic within the disability community where like we all have our own ableisms and we all have our own access needs. Sometimes it's just going to be a mess regardless.
People
But also,
time for not using alt text, and I'm like, could sighted people just respond to the tweet with an image description? Because I don't.
Yeah.
Why?
yeah, but we also really just need the companies that are producing this tech to make it accessible and inclusive. Things like getting captioning as native to all of the platforms, so that there's not battles over how to get things working, or how to we always talk about, we were talking before this panel about GIFs, that GIFs should have permanent text, like permanent alt text, because you're using the same one over and over every single time you have to write alt texts. And for someone like me who has energy issues, that can get really exhausting if I'm just trying to respond to something in a concise graphical way, to then go, oh, okay, now I want to write my alt text, but there's an energy spend there that's a lot for the thing that I've written.
And can I speak briefly to what you just said there? The team and I we wanted to caption this and make captions available to people. And Aaron was on it. Jennifer sent along like a gorgeously detailed document about how we could do it. My team had meetings and we figured out this program and they test ran it. And then before this stream, we went to implement it and we're like, oh, wait. Logistically, this will mean we can either show the captioning or people talking. And then I'm like, can I do this way? And I'm not as good at tech as I used to be, but I'm not dumb at it. Ooh, dumb. Is that, should we?
Yes, that
We
is
should get rid of
one.
that word.
Yes.
Oh, that one's going to be so hard.
It's a tough one.
I've found I use silly or just sort of like, oh, I wasn't thinking,
No,
like,
I
my brain scrambled.
I can do it. I can get rid of that, and I can start coaching my boys. That'll just take some time.
Yeah.
Dumb.
Switch
Oh.
to
It's rooted in both discrimination toward the deaf, hard of hearing, and the intellectually disabled communities. So
and
it's
it's also
double whammy there. It's a
it's
tough
also-
way, but it's. Go ahead.
It's also been used for deafblind people because we're also perceived as often being nonverbal or mute, and dumb can be used for that as well.
Yeah. Oof.
Like a quadruple whammy of no.
Oh man, and that one is
Yep.
so pervasive.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh.
As someone
until
who
we-
sometimes goes nonverbal, I'm also having trouble getting rid of it, and it's slightly ironic in that way.
Yeah.
Wait till we tell you about lame.
Oh no,
that
lame.
one's another
Lame. I'm
one.
good with.
Crazy is the
Yeah.
one that I've been having a tough
Crazy,
time with.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, our language is so riddled with these terms, and once you start having an awareness of them, it's a lot. It's a lot of work to disentangle those linguistic roots.
Yeah.
And when you do, I mean, some of them, if you look at disabled history, it's pretty horrific what we've been through. The history is deeply rooted in institutionalization, eugenics, forced sterilization, but also really badass human beings being incredible and making extraordinary change. And quite a few of them are on this panel right now, and like I'm so thrilled and honored to be here with all of you. But when you look at the roots of some of these words, a lot of them came out of that institutionalization era of how people were treated and referred to.
Yeah, we still have institutions, by the way.
Oh yeah. I want to say real quickly, hey, everybody out there who might inside yourself, right, be hearing this like, wait, I can't say crazy. Wait, does that mean mad? Like, you know, is mad? And it's like, oh, what about this? What about, oh, well, I guess I just can't say anything. Well, I guess I just can't, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to say to you, okay, I'm talking to you because guess who feels this way? Because I use words a lot. That's all I'm good at is words. And over the course of me becoming hopefully a marginally less shitty human being and hanging out with the feminists who were very gracious and gently clued me into some stuff, and I'd be like, I shouldn't. And then eventually I was like, God damn it, can't I just talk with my words like I was brought up to talk? And the answer is sure. Be as shitty as you want to be forever and know that you're a part of the problem. So what I'm going to say to you, everybody out there who's listening to this, and say, and if it rises up in you, this thought of like, well, I guess I just can't ever talk to anyone again, take a deep breath. That is not an unreasonable thing to think, because what you are being asked to do is hard, and it's hard to do hard things. But you gotta kind of decide, do you want to be on the side of the angels and move us forward into a better future? Like, my kids are better than me at the gender language. We have instituted a they jar in the house because we can cuss all we want in this house. There's no swear jar here. But when daddy goofs, when daddy misgenders somebody, he has to put money in the they jar. And let me tell you, there's a lot of money in there but it shows them what I value, and what I value is really trying to get better at this. So I'm speaking to, you know, if the only people we're talking to is people who already get us and who already agree and whatever, you know, what I'm here to say, hey, fellow people who are kind of sucking at this and you feel guilty, but also it's hard. I get you. It's not a bad thing to think, but don't let that be the last thing you think. Like, then say, you know, let me put it in some gamer terms, right? Yeah, it's hard. You know what the solution is? Get good. You know, like, you put in the work, you play that game, and you get better. You grind this skill, boys. And most of you are boys who are thinking these thoughts. Just saying. Not that I'm going to call out white dudes, but man, we got work to do. Okay.
Throughout the fact that I think about what kind of person you really want to be, because kindness is such an important value that I don't think we talk about a whole lot in the gaming community, that I don't think we talk about a lot in the science fiction community either. But like, learning to change your language is a kind thing to do fundamentally. And so if you want to be a fundamentally kind human being, this is a part of how you do that.
Said way better than I did. Could we do a couple? Actually, what I'll say is, any other thoughts, comments people want to jump in before we maybe grab one more question? And has anybody spotted a question that they particularly liked? Jennifer, you've been stellar in the chat. You're so much better at it than I am.
I also threw a couple in the Zoom chat of earlier questions that people had asked. So
okay, here's one.
There's one about accessibility best practices, and there's one about normalizing the idea. It's basically the social model of disability.
Yeah, let's do what are accessibility.
For those who don't actually know what the social model of disability is, really quickly, there are two models of disability. One is the medical model, which means you have to get diagnosed, and it is basically means that you are diagnosed. There is a problem that is identified. It is a problem with you, and the medical model is entirely based on the idea that you need to be cured for your disability. The social model is that disability means that you are unable to function in society because of how society is structured. You struggle to function in the way society is built because society is not built to accommodate you. The problem is not you, it is society. And that's why a lot of people, that's why cure narratives are something that we talk about a lot when we're talking about in fiction and disability, where people magically get their disability taken away by some magical cure, or that's the entire quest where you have to save someone from being disabled, as if disability is a bad thing. That ascribes to the medical model, in that disability is something inherently wrong with yourself, and you need to be cured of it, rather than disability is a failing of society being unable to accommodate you and your needs.
Well, like for me, with both my disabilities, being blind is no problem. I've been happier since I went blind than I ever have in my life. But if I don't get a transplant in the next couple of years, more than likely I'll die. That is something I have to get cured or be gone. And I've got too many little nephews and nieces to be around for to let that happen.
And
I mean,
no, go ahead.
Again, Temple is looking for a kidney. If you want to find out if you are a potential match, information is in his pinned tweet, as well as information on how to support his surgery.
Yeah, I'm gonna be asking all y'all for, like, I'll do an email. I'll get all your social medias and I'll get all your whatever, and then when we harvest this video and put it on YouTube, which will be captioned. But also I would like to say Worldbuilders captions all of its videos. And that I can't take credit for that. That's our executive director, Gray, who made it happen. But
I want to say one thing real quick off of what Temple said.
Yeah, please.
I was born deafblind. This is me. I've never known any other body. I've never known any other experience. When we talk about cure narratives, it's the idea that there is fundamentally something wrong with the way that I was born and the way that I exist. If you were to suddenly make me sighted, I wouldn't know how to read. I wouldn't know how to walk. I wouldn't know how to get around in the world, because my brain has rewired itself to see out of one kind of lucky eye. I'm okay. I like the body I'm in. But like Temple said, there sure are some things I would fix. I would take a great pleasure in kicking the PTSD out of my brain. That's just not fun to play with, you know? So like, yeah, complicated, but like my deafblind body is my body. That's who I am, who I've always been.
So can I ask a question here? Because as I'm thinking about this, and I notice when I like How to Train Your Dragon. It's well-known example. So I'm forgetting his name, the main character. Hiccup. He loses a foot. And then it's immediately replaced with a foot that is perfect and does everything a regular foot is. And that always struck me as being that struck me as kind of cheap.
Yeah,
like,
Daredevil.
is that cheap?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I call it the Daredevil syndrome.
Right, like Daredevil.
He's blind, but he's better than anything.
Like Daredevil's in it. It's like, oh, he's blind, but he can see better than
Daredevil is like the one of the poster childs for the super crypt stereotype, for the super crypt super crypt trope. Imani, you were gonna say something? I saw your box light up.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that like with these narratives, it's like this. I hate these cure narratives because there's this idea that like we have to get them, because the people who don't get them are the people that want to be disabled or are lazy actually. Yeah. They want the pity and that's part of the other side of this issue is like there are some people that are comfortable in their bodies. They just need the world to like buck up and do the right thing. But like if we create this dynamic whereby the people who are cured are the ones that actually are actually trying, and those who don't are the ones not, you're just going to create another kind of caste system or class system for oppression.
Yeah.
I had the incredible privilege this year to write Daredevil as part of the Jessica Jones Playing with Fire series for Serial Box. And when I wrote Daredevil, I wrote him as blind. And every single time I talk about Daredevil on a panel at a comic convention, inevitably some dude in the back says, but Daredevil's not really blind. And to that I say, sit down, he's ours, you can't have him.
Yeah. And I'm not bagging on Daredevil. That's one of my favorite superheroes. But it's more often it's done wrong than it's done right.
Exactly. Like, he doesn't need to be chucking his white cane in an alleyway just so he can go fight crime. He should be using cane as a weapon because you can.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Can we talk about a few more of these? Because this is something I've thought about a lot, and in trying to bring it into my own stuff in a better way than I have in the past. So can we talk, would you guys be willing to talk more about ones that, like, and I'm thinking, going all the way back to Tolkien, in the story of Beren and Luthien, Beren loses a hand, right? And so, like, that's about as classic fantasy as you can get. But also, I'd like to note, Beren is awesome, and then he loses his hand. It's like, here he is, one-handed Beren. Who's the badass? It's him. So, like, that's probably a good example.
It's been since I read it, so I would have to reread. But, I mean, if he doesn't turn evil and he doesn't immediately get a new hand, like, yeah, he's fine.
Yeah.
And
God,
his
the bar is so low. The bar is so low.
Yeah. Well, and if his entire identity doesn't shift to mourning the hand that he has lost, instead of going, I'm awesome and do the things, and now I do the things a little bit differently than I did the things before, and this is a new way to do the things, and maybe I find cool new ways to do the things that I didn't even think of before, because now I have to be creative in approaching problem solving. Because that's something we're all really good at. I think disabled people in general are phenomenal problem solvers. As a producer, I would not be half of the producer I am without being a disabled person who has to plan and think.
It's like disabled parkour. Like, we figure a way out. Like, we figure. Like, there have been buildings that have been like under construction, and I've managed to like climb places so I could get to where I'm going, and because there was an elevator there. Like, the building was under construction, where I needed to enter was under construction, but I would figure out a way. Like, that's just our daily lives.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many roadblocks, and you have to parse them all out, and eventually you finally figure out a solution. But if I'm going to a new building, I don't know how much time you build in, but I build in at least a half an hour if it's a new space.
Yeah. Well, like for this, I was here a half hour early because I cannot stand to be late to anything, because it's so much more stress and so much more work to find my way around. Because I got to get lost at least once whenever I go somewhere.
I see some people in chat are sort of going back to what we said about, like, losing a hand, and being like, well, as long as his entire disposition doesn't change, or he doesn't completely and totally mourn the loss of his hand, characters can have reactions to disability. They don't have to be like okay with it, because we all have to deal with internalized ableism and worrying about it. The issue comes when it's the only thing about their character. They can have complicated feelings about losing their hand. They can have complicated feelings about getting a diagnosis. That's okay.
When's the last time that you saw a disabled character who was a romantic interest, who's sexy, who's seen as appealing? Like, when's the last time that you saw a disabled character who's complex? If you're more than one thing, I've known people who have written, disabled characters who are queer and people of color, and had pushback from whoever they're publishing to, because they said, oh, those people don't exist, that's too much. And they're like, I'm right here, hi, hello, I'm the author writing this thing. Because that's too much for people to process often. Like, you can be the one thing.
Oh yeah, I've had people on my TikTok, like, I was talking about how most disability representation is just white people, and like people are like, well, if they have too many, if they're like Black and disabled, that's just pandering. I'm like, so my existence is pandering now? Like, I've had cerebral palsy since I was 5, but my existence and wanting to be seen in the media that I consume is pandering to people, because they have this idea that this is identity politics. No, it's just simply wanting to exist and have those and be validated. And I keep thinking about, like, we talk all the time about medical disparity, in the medical system and how we're not seen even by our doctors if you're a person of color being disabled. Like they play games, they watch movies, they read books. Like this is a holistic way to kind of address this lack of representation in the medical field by using media as a mirror to our reality. So I always get really angry and really frustrated when people are like, "Oh, that's too much." I'm like, "No, it's not enough."
I mean,
not enough.
I've literally been called a bingo card before because I am deafblind, queer, and Jewish. And I'm like, no, that's just who I am. Leave me alone. Why is that?
Yeah.
Yep. And it's one of those things where people are like, are there works that, like, what works would you recommend? And there are a lot of works that are getting better at having disabled representation. But like Imani was saying, there are very few representations of intersectional disabled characters.
Yeah.
I really don't know any. I can't think of any media off the top of my head other than things I've created that accurately represent a disabled person, of like a Filipino or Asian disabled LGBTQ person. Like I can't. Like the only ones I can think of is like I put accessibility aids in something in the Islands of Sinuna because I wrote it. So
can we take a moment to come up with a few? Like as examples, even though like, and again, this will also, I remember once saying, yeah, show me a book with a mature woman with children who is the protagonist and main character who isn't avenging her fallen family, saving a child or doing something because her husband was killed. And people are like, Lois McMaster Bujold. I'm like, cool, give me two more. And they're like, and it's like, oh no, there's a huge gap in here. So, but can we find a couple good ones to hold up, or at least clearing that very low bar? Because I'm really struggling.
So I'm gonna plug my own work for a second.
Please.
Like that's one of the things. I mean, disabled people destroy science fiction, and disabled people destroy fantasy. Both anthologies do have a lot of representation in short fiction categories. There's also a lot of nonfiction that you can read as well about how disabled people have interacted with those genres. It's not by any means comprehensive. We did not hit every single disability. We did not hit every intersection, but I feel like you will get good quality writing from disabled people in those genres, from those anthologies.
Somebody in the chat here hit a great one. The ant in Dragon Prince.
Maya.
Who's like fucking is my everything. But
Dragon Prince has a lot of really great disability representation.
It really does.
And they actually do the idea of masking for the comfort of non-disabled people in there too, which I was shocked to have that storyline happening. But
I was also really delighted to see chronic pain depicted very well in Mary Robinette Cole's most recent The Relentless Moon.
Yeah.
In the Lady Astronaut books. I really appreciated how chronic pain manifested in that book.
Somebody has brought up The Fool from Robin Hobb's books, who is very gender fluid and later on has like physical disabilities. They're frail. They don't have a really strong constitution. I love The Fool as a character.
Fran Wild's book Updraft also has disabled characters in it, and it's interesting because nobody talks about it as having disability representation because it's just there.
I know I actually haven't gone around to watching the show myself, but I will laud any show that has autistic actors playing autistic characters instead of non-autistic actors playing an autistic person. Everything's Gonna Be Okay has 2 actors in it. They are both autistic. And from the clips I have seen, it looks really good. Like I said, I haven't gotten around to watching the show myself just because I've been busy. But hey, we love to see.
I have, and there are
people.
about 6 autistic actors in it, all authentically played, and queer characters really digging in on having characters with diverse experiences.
God, yeah, we love to see autistic characters being played by actually autistic people.
Yeah,
There's
good stuff.
Dale Mohammed's the Labyrinth's Archivist. I'm trying to remember the title now. It's about a blind archivist, and it's written by a blind author who's a woman of color. Let me pull up.
Imani, what did you?
I was gonna say the L Word Generation Q has Jillian Mercado in it.
Yep.
Who's a Afro-Latina. There's also Give Me Liberty that has Lauren Spencer in it. She's a Black woman.
Special.
Nicole Bahari has she has chronic illnesses, and she was in, I want to say, what was that one? Headless Horseman. Why can't I think?
Yeah, it's Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, she's in Sleepy Hollow, and she's doing a lot of other work. I think she's also in Black Mirror. So yeah, and also Chris Rock is just come out as autistic as well.
Really?
Yeah, he's been doing intense therapy regarding his autism, which I'm not going to get into that debate, but we all know. But
Conversations to be had another time in another place.
Exactly. The Station Agent is one of my favorite movies. It's one of the more nuanced portrayals of disability with Peter Dinklage. There's not a lot of people of color. I would recommend following the careers of people like Tatiana Lee, Ajani Murray,
CJ Jones.
Yeah, CJ Jones. Lynn Ventimiglia is Jewish and queer. Yeah, and she has a short film on Amazon Prime called The Layover, which is really good.
I've seen that on ads. I should watch that.
Yeah, it's really good. She's really good.
Special is really great too. And again, you're having a disabled person creating the show as well as in the cast. So you're getting representation there, and that's a queer character and a queer creator.
And I'll say, as somebody who gets a lot of feedback on what he writes, like specifically as part of my revision process, wanting to put it in is half the battle, and then get beta readers, get people like from multiple different viewpoints, multiple different perspectives to give it a looky-loo, because and be like, cool, I had a person with a disability read my thing. It's like, nope. Even if that person has the disability maybe you're touching on or trying to portray, there's many different experiences. And you want to get more than a little if you're not coming from your own experience. Can I ask the group, and this is an interesting one because I don't know, Raistlin from the Dragonlance books, disabled, good or bad? I mean, he's complex. I mean, we got to give it complex, right?
Definitely complex.
Good guy, bad guy.
I don't know. That was a long time ago.
It was a long time for me too.
I feel like I would need to reread to
yeah,
but
not to get in it.
Not categorically bad though, right? It's complex enough to make us think.
I do want to throw out there real quick also, if you're going to have disabled people read your work to spot check for you, hire a sensitivity reader.
Yes.
Yep.
Hire somebody who is experienced, because yes, you can have anybody who you find read it, but what you actually want is somebody who understands the context of your work, which is why you hire people who are not just disabled, but who also understand how that fiction actually sits within its genre.
Yes.
I really think it's important to pay them well and to respect what they have to say.
So
Yes.
Karen Schott just asked, what is a sensitivity reader? A sensitivity reader is a person from a marginalized community who's being represented in the work you're creating, that you send your material to prior to publication, to do a read through, to talk to you about authenticity. It is a paid position. It is part of your editorial process, and it is taxing work, because often you are reading things that are very hurtful and are coming out of ignorance. It's not usually willfully harmful, but and coming back with notes. And so you hire sensitivity readers for any marginalized community that you are not a part of, where you're dealing with characters in depth in those circumstances. Also, I want to add, if you are planning to put a character from a marginalized community into your work, and especially in terms of game design and things, talk to those people early on. Don't do this at the end when you're going to have to rework everything when somebody comes back and says, this is not okay. You're going to save yourself a lot of headache if you start working with people right off the bat before you start getting it all in there. Asking those questions and learning what to avoid and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too. And I wholeheartedly support paying for sensitivity consultants and for everything you get with disability. But if you're sitting out there working at your kitchen table after 12 hours of work during the day, trying to create something, I will do sensitivity reading for free. I will do accessibility passes on your games, on your books, whatever it is you need for free, just so it's out there for my people.
Can I ask, what's masking? Because somebody here says, I saw
Mackenzie,
the depiction
do you
of
wanna say that?
masking.
Yeah. So masking is when you essentially put on a mask of being non-disabled in order to make other people around you feel comfortable, and in general get through life without being harassed about it. I do it a lot as someone who is able-bodied but disabled with my autism. I put on the mask of being neurotypical a lot of times when I'm on stream. I just sort of like, if my brain is sort of scrambling for something, I will just sort of present like I am neurotypical. I am not having a problem right now. The Discord beeping in my head is not causing me to overload. I am okay. Just so people don't, harass me for it. I do it a lot in classes, or when I finished university at the beginning of this year. A lot of times in classes, I wouldn't bring it up. I'd just be like, yeah, I'm just here. Don't ask me about it. I wouldn't be really open about it just because it was safer for me to put on a mask and pretend to be non-disabled. So I wouldn't get questions, I wouldn't get harassed, and I wouldn't get those issues like I mentioned earlier where people are like, "Oh, you're fine. You're just really good at math because you're Asian," or "Oh, you're not autistic. You function so fine though." Like, I don't like, that's when I mask. I know other people with chronic pain, like Jen. You've talked about masking to me where you'll be on stream and you'll just be like, "I'm fine," and your pain scale is at like an 8 out of 10 or something like that. Where we just put on that facade of being okay when we're not okay, because it's so tiring for people to ask us what's wrong with us that sometimes it's just easier to pretend that everything's fine. And it would be,
but in a little bit of a different way, which is to say that, like, there is so many times when a sighted person will be like, "Oh, can you see this thing over here? Can you see that bird? Or can you hear this noise?" And I'm like, "Sure, yeah, I can see the bird that you're talking about. I have no idea where the bird is." But it's easier for me to just pretend that I can see the bird than it is to have the sighted person basically physically turn me and then tilt my head at the exact direct angle that it would need to be in for me to even have a shot at seeing the bird.
And the thing is that masking causes trauma. When you, as an autistic person, I have masked for so long, I have autistic burnout, in that, like, I'm tired, my brain is like, my brain feels melty. I have had times like this whole summer where I'm a writer, I couldn't form words. That's how bad my burnout got after masking throughout the entirety of university. I lost the ability to write, I lost the ability to speak. It's being in a situation where you have to mask because people are being invasive or otherwise disrespectful, or you're masking to avoid harm. It can still, like, it's the safer option at the time, but it causes such long-term problems. I'm still recovering from it. I've burnt out so bad. I had a moment on stream, and I write for Dungeons and Dragons for a living. I play Dungeons and Dragons for work. I had a moment on stream. I burnt out so bad, I stopped recognizing dice. I couldn't recognize a D20. Someone asked me to roll a D8, and I looked at my pile of dice and I said, my brain stopped. It gets real bad when you're constantly pretending, and it's something it would be nice to have an environment where you don't have to mask. And that's what a lot of destigmatizing is about, is creating those environments where you don't have to mask anymore, so that we can start being able to heal from that trauma.
And a lot of times, like, people just don't care. Like, one of the things that's most bothersome is, like, they'll ask you these invasive questions because they're curious, but, like, then they'll walk away. Like, most people who are asking those invasive questions don't give a shit about you. Like, they're nosy and curious to be nosy and curious, and then they never take any time to get to know you as a person. And that's why all these stereotypes are so infuriating to us, because they give people permission to take our stories and the discard of us, because they don't really want to deal with the complexities of who we are. So that's why we mask, because we're not, like, for me, I was born with my disability. I've had a visible disability since I was 2 years old. So, but for me, masking is more of like me smiling all the time, being giddy and jolly and cute. Because if I'm not, then I'm a burden, and then people will actively try to kill me. So it's like, it's people
It's
just journey.
the unfortunate thing we have to do to survive sometimes. And it sucks that we are in a situation where we have to put on that facade in order to literally just survive, just get through the day. That's how it's awful.
And also
it's tiring,
the double-edged sword of it too is, like, people then say, well, but I couldn't tell. You don't look disabled. You don't act disabled. You showed up and you had your makeup on and your hair done, and you seem,
But you don't have a disabled mindset.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't understand the toll that it takes to do that you had to mark out 2 hours and all of your energy for those 2 hours to get ready, and by the time you're there and you've spent all of your energy to show up, and so when you're actually at the thing, you're not enjoying what's happening because all of your energy is focused on presenting as non-disabled for people, so you don't have to deal with, oh my gosh, you seem so sick and you were fine yesterday.
I also will say, from a presentation perspective, I have found that it is safer for me to wear sunglasses and seem like I am fully blind, instead of being as partially sighted, which that's not how I would describe myself. That's not what it's like. But if I'm not wearing dark glasses and I'm using my cane, I get more harassment, and that harassment can escalate. I've had people get in my face, I've had it become unsafe. So I've learned how to perform my disability because it makes people more comfortable. It's another form of masking, I think. It's like there's the mask where you put on the able-bodied face, but there's also when you are like, this is the mask or caricature of my disability that means that you will leave me alone and I will be safe.
Yeah, if you use the parking permit, you better have your cane. Because if you can walk without a cane, you're not disabled and you're faking it, and they key your car.
Yeah. Well, and everybody assumes if you're walking with a cane, with a white cane, that you're totally blind and you've been blind since birth. And a lot of times I'm just too damn tired to explain it to people. And I'll just go ahead and mask and pretend to be totally blind so they'll leave me the hell alone. I just don't have the energy to explain it for the 5 millionth time.
Imani, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm so sorry to cut you off, Temple. One of the things that I found I act like a baby in front of people that that are dangerous to me, so they can look like the hero and save me instead of hurting me. Yeah. Like, I will literally act like a child around people that I'm in danger around, because they expect me to, because I have crutches, and they only think of disability in one way. And if I know that I'm in harm's way, if I can make them feel better about themselves, there's less of a chance that they'll hurt me.
Yeah. The only reason why the situation that I described earlier in this stream did not become a violent situation is because I continued to just sort of seem really meek and quiet. This guy was getting in my face about whether or not I was really blind, and if I had in any way become aggressive, if I had in any way told him it wasn't his business, I could tell it was going to get worse. And it's like, there were 5 people who walked past me in this situation, and nobody seemed to notice that there was a man interrogating a blind person on the street.
Yeah. What it sounds to me like, and just to try to you know, and maybe I don't want to underestimate the ability of the people tuning in, and my community, which is generally speaking very good and very empathetic. But it sounds to me almost like if you've ever been in a really bad relationship, like a relationship that is abusive, the way you behave to avoid dealing with that person or dealing with how that person behaves, this sounds to me very similar to that, except the abusive relationship that you have is with everyone in the culture. Do you think that's a fair read?
Yeah.
So everyone out there who's ever had a shitty relationship and you've been kind of scared about how that person might react, there's your touchstone. And if you thought that was bad, it was. It was bad. You know it. I know it. But imagine getting to feel that way maybe whenever someone comes up to you. And again, I don't say this to make any of y'all feel bad out there. But as I heard you all describing it, and honestly, when you were describing masking, Mackenzie, I was like, yeah, that thing. Like, I'm super good at that thing. I'm a fucking pro. I'm a performer.
Ableism hurts everyone, man.
It's like I'm Germanic. I'm a man. You know, I've come from a certain Midwestern culture, but then you were describing it, and you're like, and this is why it's bad. I'm like, oh shit. You mean this is the wrong thing? You're describing a thing that I shouldn't do. I honestly, for real, I spent a lot of time being like, yep, I got super good at that already. I'm ahead of the game. And then I spent a little while thinking, oh wait, is she describing a bad thing? Is there a bad version of masking? And then you kept talking, and I'm saying this out loud because somebody in here, I wouldn't have said this out loud, but somebody in here said this, and so I figured I would also say it. I'm almost 40 and hearing about this social view for the first time. I thought masking was the goal. And so, yeah.
I mean, if it helps any, for a while I thought it was the goal too. It's just something that happens when you're in a society that thinks disability is bad. And, you know, everyone around you wants you to be quote unquote normal. And it's the same thing with, like, heteronormativity and, you know, making things a default. It just sort of hurts everyone. And it's just stuff you gotta unlearn and take time to. Even, like, I'm still unlearning it. I'm unlearning the habit of instinctively trying to hide it. But it's one of those things where hopefully the goal is to be in a place where you don't feel like you have to mask in order to get through the day.
I'll also say that you were raised for that to be the goal. Like, that's part of our social conditioning. So yes, people told you that that was the goal. Unlearning that as the goal is part of the work.
Yeah.
I think part of why finding the disabled community has been such an important, joyous thing in my life, other than discovering these connections and this history and just these spectacular human beings who are saving the world, was finding a group of people where I don't have to mask, where I can say, the only way I can zoom into this call today is in my pajamas in bed. Like, that's what's going to happen. And nobody cares because we all get that. There's no pressure for people to perform. There's no pressure for blind people to make eye contact. There's no pressure for, you know, people to push for locations or, you know, to stay longer than they can. Like, you can just be. You don't have to perform.
Everybody, I just this has been an earth-shaking conversation for me. This has been a seismic realignment in my perception of a lot of things, and I thank you for that. And I feel a little dumb. I feel a little guilty because I thought I was doing some good work.
Language.
Shit, motherfucker.
Like a shithead.
I feel unfortunately uninformed, and that's going to be a hard one. I know I'm going to have to pull it out by the root. We're going to have a dumb jar in the house now, and so I can get on top of that. But also I have kept you almost an hour later than I said, and I can't thank you enough. I don't want to cut this conversation off, but also I feel like I'm not doing my job as a good host and moderator to say, like, I could keep going, but I feel we should stop because it's not fair of me to ask. It's like, hey, does everyone want to keep going? You don't do that in a public forum. You've already been double generous and considerate and kind with your time and with your expertise.
Well, Pat, we really don't get enough opportunities to do this. And
I want to do this.
We would stay here for 4 or 5 hours doing this.
I want to do this on the reg. Can we do that? Here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to ask you on stream. But hey, everybody, if you think this is informative as anything and you wish that you got to see more conversations like this, here's my guess. Is they're out there. I know that I could have probably found these conversations if I'd been looking. I will certainly attempt to host more of these conversations for my own betterment and to bring them to the community. Everybody here, I feel so lucky to have met you. And I hope to do more of these conversations in the future. And believe me, I'll be reaching out to the people in this chat first and foremost because they have proven their excellence in their knowledge of and ability to share and discuss this.
Pat, one thing. If you want discussions, I create hashtags on Twitter of discussions that are almost identical to this. So I have I've created like a dozen hashtags that like have all been trending about the disability community. So you can find them on my profile. I can repost them tonight for you all.
And so
Imani is like a hero of mine. I don't know how to express this. She's so phenomenal, and I'm so overjoyed that she is that. Yeah, I'm just kind of sitting in here in awe because she's phenomenal. So follow what she does because it's
on my Twitter. I did loop in everybody's handle, so you can find them from there. Again, I will when we finally get to migrate this over onto YouTube. I will put it in a blog and I will put everybody's dealio and where you can find them on all the socials. That might take a while. It's a crazy time with the fundraiser right now. But again, everybody, thank you so much. Jennifer, thank you so much for doing the heavy lifting here and putting this together. I am at a loss for words, and that does not often happen.
So we do sign-offs where people can find us just for the...
Let's do one more with the knowledge that also you can find it on my blog later. Also follow my Twitter to their Twitters and from thence into beautiful gloriousness. So first, Temple.
Yep, I'm Blind Temple at Blind Temple on Twitter. I do accessibility help for the blind. I do an Ask a Blind Guy, Ask Me Anything on the 18th of each month. And if you have any questions at all, DM me directly and I'll always be there and I'll always answer.
Also, if you got a spare kidney, what blood type are you? Is that an inappropriate question to ask? The easiest one?
Oh.
Yeah. More people are O-type blood, and it doesn't matter positive or negative. So
awesome. Elsa?
Hi, I'm Elsa Sjunneson. You can find me at Snarkbat, SNARKBAT, on Twitter. I'm basically that handle everywhere on the internet. You can also, where I do basically threads on science fiction and disability constantly. I talk a lot about what it's like to be deafblind. And you can also support my Patreon, Dispatches from a Deafblind World, which is also under the Snarkbat handle.
Imani?
Hello, my name is Imani Barbarin. You can find me at Imani_Barbarin on Twitter. You can also find my hashtags. Hashtag things disabled people know. Hashtag abled are weird. Hashtag accessibility at home. Hashtag you can love me but you can't hold my hand. There's several. You'll find them.
Mackenzie?
Hi, I'm Mackenzie De Armas. You can find me over on Twitter at Mackenzie Lane DA. If you've been in the chat, that's my name, so you know how to spell it. I'll also read it out. It's MAKENZIELANEDA. Over on Twitter, you can find, I've got assortment of links. I got like my pinned tweet. You can find all the cool stuff I'm doing. I usually yell into the void there. That's the best place to keep up with information about my cool stuff. But yeah.
Everybody after this in my chat, help me make sure that I find Mackenzie and follow their stream and get all that set up. Because I'm scattered as anything and I'll screw it up and forget and then feel bad. Jennifer.
Hey, I am Jen Kretchmer. I am DreamWisp on Twitter, DreamWisp. I am DreamWisp Jen on Twitch. On Twitter, you can find the accessibility in tabletop gaming guide. That is in my pinned tweet. I do a lot of talk about accessibility in gaming, in media. I write, produce, perform, direct, all the things. And I'm so happy to have everybody here and to support Worldbuilders. Thank you all so much. Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming in on such short notice. Mackenzie jumped in at the last minute.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm always like, yes, I love to talk about this stuff. Hello, I'm here.
Thanks so much for the invitation and for sharing your.
This has been the best panel I've done for the whole, maybe ever. And I hang with some cool folks, and you are cooler than them. That's secret. Don't clip that, everyone.
Oh God! Thank goodness no one was listening.
Oh no, it's not like it's live.
Oh God!
Can I say one more thing before I go?
Please.
I misspoke because I was just bullshitting off the top of my head like I normally do. But my transplant is not the easiest one to do. It is hardest because there's more type O people than there are any others. So there's more people needing kidneys with type O. So it's about 4 or 5 year wait. And the longer you're on dialysis, it goes up 15% every year that you're likely to die from complications from kidney disease.
Dang.
So right now I'm at about 3 years. So, it's getting up there to where it's getting to be inevitability.
Well, that'll be a nice thing for, like, I can bump that signal too, and hopefully we can do some good there too. I think I've seen a couple of people here in the chat already. They've linked to both your Twitter and to the medical expenses thing, and so I think we can get you some traffic there.
I've raised $12,000, and they tell me I need a minimum of $20,000 to just pay my part of the copay for the transplant. Transplant's about $400,000.
Trufa.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about medicine. That's a future conversation.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know. It's good to know that we have things for part 2.
Yeah.
Oh, there are things.
Thank you so much, Pat.
Thank you guys again so much.